The first lesson is simple. Never itemize your life. A person who recites the price of a suit or a bracelet exposes a poverty of practice because a family that has compounded for generations treats prices like the weather, important but impersonal, acknowledged and then left alone. This is not shyness, it is technique. A number spoken aloud fixes value in the air and invites judgment. A number withheld keeps the field fogged, and fog is where power moves comfortably. The roots of this restraint are older than the railways that made so many American fortunes, and older than the trading houses that laced London to the world. Medieval Europe wrote sumptuary laws to restrain silk and jewels, and though those statutes faded, the habit lingered among those who did not need permission. English aristocrats learned to signal status with the cut of a coat, the polish of boots, the ability to understate. When fortunes crossed the Atlantic in the 19th century, the habit crossed too, adapted by American dynasties who preferred to appear unimpressed by their own dominion. In New York, when the Astor Ballroom decided who mattered, the rule was not how loudly you spoke, but how lightly, as if every sentence had a trust behind it. Ward McAllister's famous tally of the 400 treated social capacity like a ledger that rewarded good breeding and punished noise. On Fifth Avenue, the marble palaces showed an appetite that could have been shouted. Yet those families cultivated a manner that downplayed the devouring. The message was careful. We can do this, yet we do not need to talk about it. The house can be a spectacle if the voice is not. Consider the banking rooms where American industry was underwritten. J.P. Morgan's library on Madison Avenue was a fortress disguised as a study. The desk was not a throne, it was a workbench for influence. Meetings were held in tones that made the staggering sums sound like minor repairs. The House of Morgan learned what many old families already knew. A reputation for understatement is a tool in negotiations. When you hide appetite, you buy time. When you refuse to show surprise at any price, you force the other side to wonder what you know. Silence becomes a premium currency backed by compounding memory. Across the Channel, the Rothschilds practiced a similar grammar. The family preferred postal codes and private notes to public pronouncements. Their collecting could be grand, but their language around money was cautious, almost clerical, as if wealth were a set of figures in a ledger that must always balance. This reticence was not only taste. In the age of loans to kings and railways, discretion protected access. If you do not boast to newspapers, cabinets will keep calling. If you do not brag about fees, empires will keep paying them. The least noisy bankers were often the most central to the orchestra. The psychology is straightforward and unnerving. In a crowded marketplace, bragging creates reference points. Tell everyone you paid a fortune for a tapestry, and you help establish a ceiling that future sellers will use against you and your heirs. Tell no one, and the tapestry remains an aesthetic event rather than a data point. Old money prefers assets that speak for themselves over stories that must be told. Pierre Bourdieu called it habitus, the internalized system of preferences and postures that reproduces class without announcing itself. The language of restraint is habitus made audible. It is a posture that curates what becomes common knowledge. Thorstein Veblen made a career of describing conspicuous consumption, the theatre where status is proven by waste. Old money studied the same theatre and chose a different seat. It learned to spend invisibly where possible, to transmute conspicuous consumption into conspicuous composure, a bespoke suit that never says its name, a museum wing given without a brass band, or with a family name placed so simply that the marble seems to have thought of it alone. Even philanthropy becomes a whisper. Andrew Carnegie published a Gospel of Wealth that made generosity a doctrine, yet the older families learned to treat giving as gardening. You prune, you plant, you do not narrate the cost of mulch. Quiet is not saintly, it is strategic. Families that have endured panics know that noise attracts examiners, legislators, opportunists, and thieves. In times of speculation, the crowd wants a hero, and a hero's biography is an audit trail. Old money prefers to be the counterparty no one names. During the crash at the end of the 1920s, those who had advertised their genius became targets for blame or for rescue on harsh terms. The discreet could renegotiate in private. Restraint lowers the cost of surviving public anger. It also reduces the chance that a distant cousin will quote you to a journalist. There is a second strategy disguised as etiquette. Refusing to price drop is a bargaining method. When you do not volunteer what you paid for a painting, you preserve the ambiguity that makes future buyers cautious. They cannot be sure they can afford to bid against your family, so they bid less or not at all. When you do not name the cost of a land parcel, brokers struggle to triangulate your appetite. In markets where information is profit, ignorance in others is a dividend. The language of restraint creates ignorance professionally and does so while looking polite. Visit Newport's cottages, those palaces with the false modesty of summer names. The bedrooms are a chorus of understatement, the libraries a doctrine of it. Yet what you will hear most often in the right company is the tide of omission. People speak in histories and families, not invoices. A necklace might be grandmother's, a painting from Paris, a rug Persian, and that is the end of the line. The provenance is a lineage, not a bill. By never letting price be the headline, the family prevents price from becoming the identity of the object. The heir learns to value a story that cannot be haggled. This language also immunizes against envy by diluting measurement. The psychological fact is cruel. People compare. Give them numbers, and they will sort themselves into winners and losers by the end of dessert. Deny them numbers, and they will drift into other categories. Taste, humor, kindness, history. Old money moves the contest off the field where the nouveau riche are strongest. The socially gifted can pass the ball of conversation without touching cost. It is a defensive maneuver as old as court life, where flattery was a currency and a false step could be fatal. In private, the ledgers are exact. Bankers reconcile to the penny. Trustees monitor basis points like hawks. The language of restraint is not opposed to accuracy, it protects it. Numbers are for the family office and the annual meeting where distributions are considered and dividends reinvested. The dinner table is for jokes and plans and the instruction of the next generation in how to sound like you do not care, even when you care deeply. Children learn that secrets are not lies. Secrets are fences that keep gardens from being trampled. History provides examples for the careful and the careless. The Gilded Age produced fortunes that glinted on parades of silver services and ballroom ceilings. It also produced fortunes that migrated into foundations, endowments, and trusts designed to persist beyond fashion. Families that moved their wealth into quiet vehicles invested in railroads, utilities, and later the bones of cities were more likely to keep their place. Those who insisted on price as performance art saw their heirs perform worse. Markets, like gossip, have long memories. A reputation for restraint becomes a stabilizing asset when credit tightens. Even scandal reads differently through this lens. A loud collector who overpays becomes a headline and then a punchline. A quiet buyer who acquires at a discount and says nothing becomes a legend that no one can verify. In Paris, salons of the 19th century and New York galleries of the 20th, dealers learned to fear the client who spoke softly and always returned. That client was keeping a private index of value and did not need the dealer's validation. Restraint here is the refusal to be taught your own taste by prices printed in a catalogue. There is a final irony in this culture of silence. By refusing to brag, old money turns the world into a search puzzle. Outsiders are forever trying to solve the riddle of what anything cost, of who paid for what and when. The riddle distracts, and while the guessing continues, the families work. They manage forests as though they were bond ladders. They treat art like portable balance sheets. They staff their foundations with professionals who speak fluent discretion. Avoiding price talk is thus a cultural shield that doubles as a time shield. It keeps heat off the family, while compounding operates in peace. If there is a mantra, it is this: do not confuse sound with strength. Wealth that has to speak is wealth that is still auditioning. Wealth that has learned to be still has learned how to last. The lesson is not that money should be ashamed of itself. It is that money, like a well-bred hound, should be trained. The dog that barks all night is eventually shut indoors. The dog that watches silently is invited everywhere and misses nothing. So the language of restraint persists, from Mayfair drawing rooms to Wall Street hallways to the quiet offices where family constitutions are drafted. It is spoken in tailored understatement and in philanthropy that arrives without symbols, in contracts negotiated privately and in invitations that are never advertised. It protects privacy, it deflects envy, it confuses rivals, it keeps the compounding engine humming the way a clock hums, barely audible and utterly relentless. In a century that begs for attention, there is something subversive about refusing to audition. Old money's answer to the century is to leave a conversation just as it entered, having said nothing about price and everything about permanence. That is not timidity, it is choreography. In a noisy world, the quiet step is the one that lands most cleanly, and if you listen closely, beneath the polished silence, you may hear the oldest sentence in finance repeating itself, not as a boast but as a vow. What endures does not need to announce itself. It merely keeps showing up.